So this is me, to give a little bit more context. Phil went over a lot of the more relevant details, but here are the irrelevant details. This little kid to the right who's super proud about this dinosaur that he's put together, not exactly anatomically correct, I've learned since then. But I was so obsessed with dinosaurs at that age, and my entire life, there have always been like one or two things that I've been absolutely obsessed with. I recently moved and had to give away tons of Star Trek paraphernalia, which I thought like you can't even get this stuff at conventions anymore. Like how do people not want to buy this on eBay? But I couldn't even give it away for free, a lot of it, which very much saddened me. And a lot of other stuff, so many rocks, really cool rocks. But lately, I'm really obsessed with like Vue and building incredible apps with Vue. So what I'll be talking about today is, and just letting someone know, I don't think the timer has started, so I'm talking forever. First, defining enterprise, because enterprise means different things to different people. Is Vue enterprise ready? Which is a question I get a lot. Starting out, maintaining your app once you've started it, and then performance. There are always some kind of bottleneck that you run into. How to avoid getting yourself into a situation where you're suddenly trapped and you have a performance problem that you'd have to do a huge refactor to get out of. And what are some tips you can use to quickly increase the performance? And also the future, including Vue 3. I might talk a little bit about the next version of Vuex, to the extent that we know about some possibilities. All of the future stuff will be possibilities, not necessarily the future because everything is still being designed and in discussions. I think you heard all the caveats yesterday with Evan, right? So first, defining enterprise. I'm going to start with an example. Let's say we have an app that just tells the current time, like this. And if you look at your watches, there's already a bug, but we'll fix that later. But this is a pretty simple app. A lot of you could probably imagine how you might build this app. Would you call that an enterprise app? Feel free to just shout out. Yes? No? No? Shout louder, shout more. Gosh, I'm hearing one loud and assertive yes. And then mostly no's. And I think that's because we usually think of enterprise apps as like pretty simple, or like not enterprise apps. If it's not enterprise, it's pretty simple, it's pretty trivial. And when you get to enterprise, then it's like managed by some big company. But if you work long enough on that little app that tells the current time, you can decide, okay, well, maybe let's also link to people's calendars and show them upcoming events. And then let's also help them like talk to their friends through this and manage multiple time zones. And you add a bunch of other features, and it gets really crazy. And eventually you end up with something like this. And at that point, would you say designing like a smartwatch is this enterprise? Okay, everyone seems to agree yes. So at what point did it actually become enterprise? So the way I often define it is potential. So potentially, a lot of code, maybe not right now, but it might get there. Or a lot of different code bases, or both. A lot of teams, a lot of traffic to your site, a really long lifespan. Usually when we build something, we want it to be something that lasts for a long time. there are some apps where you know it'll only be used for a weekend or a month, for some special event maybe. But the vast majority of apps, the ideal is you want it to last forever and make $1 million and be the next Google or something. $1 million, that seems low. I guess I don't have big dreams. What do big companies make? And so really, I think every app, and this might be what you were thinking. I think the yes was coming from around here. Yes, okay, good. Like every app is potentially enterprise. And I think it's good to build it with keeping in mind that all of these things could and very well and hopefully will increase over time. But also, we kind of don't like the word enterprise. In fact, you have a lot of companies that have been around for like 30 years, maybe 50 years, and they still call themselves startups. And I think part of that is because, like enterprise reminds us of this. Like enterprise seems like a different culture. It seems like some job that you go to and they'll give you a pension. Maybe it'll be one of the few jobs where you'll still get a pension at the end for working there for 30 years. Like many programmers are working anywhere for 30 years anymore. But it's just soul crushing. You hate it. And you're dealing with a lot of legacy code. And we all talk about legacy code, and I think we all don't like it. Who likes legacy code? Some people? They like legacy code? Okay. A few people. And maybe they were working on different definitions. But the way I think of it is the legacy code is it's the code we don't like anymore. It could be code that we wrote last month. But now it no longer meets the requirements, and we still have to live with it. So how can we avoid stuff that feels like legacy? Legacy, to me, oftentimes is really more of an emotion, like how we feel about our code base, than actual facts about our code base. And my goal here is to help you build enterprise apps that don't feel legacy, that don't feel like that person who is just staring at their computer screen, maybe not even waiting for the day to end anymore because I think maybe they've checked out on life. Their soul has been crushed to that extent. But is Vue enterprise ready? A lot of people ask this because Vue isn't owned by a big company like Google or Facebook. Instead, it's funded by many companies all around the world. Which is, Evan was talking about a little yesterday, I think, actually makes us more stable. There's not a single organization that can decide, well, the way that we want to use this software project for, is different from how most people want to use it, but we're just going to take it in that direction. And I actually used to be a React consultant for a couple years, not trying to start any drama. But there were changes sometimes that I thought would be great to make to React. And a very common response that I would get would be, that's not really useful to Facebook. Because Facebook builds React for Facebook and incidentally for the community to use if they'd like. And Vue is really the only project that is built by a community for a community, for all of us. So absolutely it's enterprise ready, but without just listening to me, I recommend, who's familiar with Sarah Mei here? Sarah Mei? Not enough people. Because Sarah Mei is awesome. She's pretty big in the Ruby community. And she has what she calls the Mei System, because people sort of coerced her into coming up with a name for it so that she could do consulting for it. Accessibility, interface, popularity, activity, these are 4 quadrants with which we can judge technology decisions. And I think it works very well, actually. And she has a talk about this. If you search for the Mei System on YouTube or something like that, or Sarah Mei, Unpacking Technical Decisions, you'll find that talk. It's really good. And accessibility is more like, is it easy to use? And we all, I think, the people here and the people I talk to generally love the learning experience with Vue, love the resources that are available. You know, they've had a really good experience with documentation, with other learning resources out there like Vue Mastery and Vue School. You know, we have 2 like huge video platforms that produce content exclusively for us, which is pretty awesome. And then interface. Like, do things feel intuitive? And even for people from other frameworks, I've heard it how, like, you know, they say this as sort of a complaint/compliment, that it seems like Vue just steals the best ideas from everybody else, but somehow combines them in a way that actually feels right and makes sense and feels cohesive. So the interface is also something to look for, and I think it's a good thing that when we see a really good idea, we're not egotistical about it. Like, we'll take that good idea, and we often talk about gosh, you know, Ember did this thing, and probably no one else in the community is really aware of the stuff that Ember is doing, because sometimes, like, we're all in our own little bubbles, and we only know Angular stuff or React stuff or Ember stuff or Svelte stuff. And we'll take from that and we'll learn from it, and we'll try to take it a step further. So accessibility and interface were great. Popularity, this is somewhere where, like, we're not as popular as React still. React is still many times more popular than Vue. But Vue is still used by huge companies all across the world. And this part of the talk is something I don't even have to say in Asia, where, like, in Japan, Vue is unquestionably, like, what you use if you're working in enterprise. Like, the biggest, like, chat app uses it. Line, you can think of it as, like, I don't know, what do people use these days? Are we still on Snapchat, or is people leave Snapchat? I don't know, but, like, it's really big and everybody's using it, and not just people in the Snapchat demographic, which I've been told I'm not in by students who are quite shocked and a little insulted that, like, I was on Snapchat. It's like, oh, now we've got to find another service. So it's very popular. Also in China, used by, in some capacity, probably, I think by at least half of the, like, $1+ billion tech companies there. And then activity. You know, are there a lot of things happening in this space? Yes, absolutely. There are a lot of people creating resources. We already talked about Vue School, Vue Mastery. And there are a lot of people with blogs. We're very active on Stack Overflow. We have our own forums. We have our own chat. And there's a lot of people producing really cool projects in the community. And we're working on even better, like, documentation and collaboration with the community to help them build third-party applications and help them more actively participate in the ecosystem. Again, as Evan was saying the other day, one of the big reasons for the rewrite for Vue 3 was to make it easier to contribute to, make it more modular, so you didn't have to understand this whole big thing just to contribute to one little part. And so yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely, it's enterprise ready. But even more than that, Vue is built for developer happiness, which to me, honestly, is the only metric that matters. Like, I work as a consultant, and when I'm working with a company, the only thing I really care about is whether I'm helping the devs be happier and making them look good. That's it. That's it, because that'll help you hire people. Like, a lot of people are excited about Vue, and you want to hire the people who are going to be excited about their jobs. And also, a lot of people ask me, like, how do you find, Vue developers specifically? And I usually tell them, just don't look for a Vue developer, look for a JavaScript developer, and then give them a day on the docs, and they'll be a Vue developer. and that's been true. That one hasn't bit me yet. I haven't gotten fired for making that recommendation. And Vue also provides a lot of support. We have an official style guide. We offer not just one core library, but also many official solutions for common problems like routing and state management that are actively maintained and kept in sync with the main library. It'll also help you retain developers, because I have seen at enterprise companies, a lot of people leave just because they felt like they weren't really using the cool stuff. They weren't using the technologies that they were excited about. And the best developers have options. They have lots of options. I don't meet many non-junior developers who have trouble at all finding a job. The trouble is like, but is that really the best job for me? I feel like I could do better. It's sort of like dating problems. Like with dating apps, like you find yourself on those apps forever because it's like, but like it looks like a lot of people are interested in me that like might be better matches actually. And so you end up sometimes not investing in one relationship too deeply. Vue also helps you migrate gradually. It doesn't force you to completely rewrite your backend and do everything from scratch. Now, starting an app for enterprise, the first thing I think is actually mindset. Like, this is the most important. So many people who hire me bring me on as an expert and are ready to just go with whatever I tell them as gospel, when I'm not the expert on their app. They are the experts on their app. I've worked with other apps, and I've solved some maybe similar problems, but I don't know their problems as well as they do. And this worship of like individual people and of dogmas, when people tell you to do something because like, well, it's a best practice. I can say that about anything. I don't think you should do something just because it's the best practice. Is it the best practice for this context? What problem is it helping you solve? I think that's so important, defining what problem is it solving or avoiding. So I think it's very important to help everyone on the team, including yourself, feel like you don't know anything. We all have like guesses. We're kind of making this stuff as we go along, aren't we? Is it just me? We're kind of just like figuring out how to do things, and we're like looking at, sometimes reading like 40-year-old books of like different design patterns for code and stuff like that. Trying to learn from what's come before, but also there are new challenges. I remember when like single-page applications started becoming a thing, and my thought was, so I'm supposed to like reinvent everything I know already about like building the parts of the website that you can see in order to do what? And it wasn't very clear to me. And at that time, like, there were more problems you had to think of. You had to take into account for. It's like, well, how are we going to also like manage our CSS then? And how are we going to manage like our form tokens? Because like we had these backend frameworks like Rails, which automatically generates like a CSRF token and injects it in forms for security. And before I started working with front ends, I didn't even know that that was going on. I just had like some security thing happening that I didn't have to care about. And then suddenly I was getting errors. And so then I wasn't solving the problem specific to my app. I was solving like the problems that I created because I didn't know why I was doing it. And there can be a lot of advantages to a single page application, especially now, more so than then. But it's not always appropriate. And Vue also knows that, and Vue gives you the option to keep the system that you have and just sprinkles things in. So build working hypotheses. This is like one of my favorite phrases. This is just a working hypothesis. This is what we think will be the best for now with the information that we have and the experience we have. But keeping an open mind that what works today very well might not work in 3 months. And being okay with that. It's not because like someone was wrong necessarily. You always have to make a decision. You can't research something forever and talk to 100 different companies, hire 10 consultants to see what might be the best solution. Try something out and then refactor away from it as you need to, without judgment. And when you're choosing your base, the script version here is one of the best options for teams that don't have a lot of front-end experience. They don't know like advanced JavaScript. They don't really want to worry about things like Webpack and managing a separate build process. Like they already have a build process in their backend and it's working fine, and they don't want to invent new problems for themselves. And they can just drop this in to the head of some, or the bottom of the body of their main layout, maybe other layouts if they want to use it in other places. They can define Vue components with Vue.component, and then what they get is basically special HTML elements that do cool things for them. And the people who are using those elements don't actually have to know how to build them. They just have to know the interface. And Vue gives you the tools to provide a good interface, to give you warnings, when you use the wrong props, when you provide the wrong value to a prop, when you're missing a prop. And there's Vue CLI, which is really great for single-page applications, and also for cases where you still basically want this, but you also want to use some of Vue's more advanced features, like single-file components. And I've also seen some people decide, I don't really want Vue CLI to manage like minimizing my assets and things like that, and so I'm going to turn that part off and then just basically build it to the assets folder in my backend and have them take care of hashing and things like that, which is totally fine. You can decide who takes care of what. You can decide where the lines are, and Vue gives you the tools to do that. There are also frameworks like Nuxt and Gridsome that really provide you like a higher level framework, more convention over configuration, whereas Vue CLI has some convention and some configuration. It's kind of 50-50. Nuxt and Gridsome are much more heavily on convention, so that once you learn those conventions, you're off to a great start. And Debbie, I think, spoke a little bit about Nux. I think she mentioned it the other day. And some really cool stuff some of which I didn't know about and I learned about. That was really cool. That she and the Nux team have been working on. And then Gridsome is really great for static sites that are really content-driven. And I also maintain a project called Vue Enterprise Boilerplate, which tries to compile all of my best practices that I've learned with a lot of documentation and inline comments so that it's not only the project I use to start like 98% of my new enterprise projects, when we're actually starting a new app, but I also use it as a reference to pull in really nice development features into the apps that already exist. And also a lot of people use it as a study guide to learn about some of these patterns that I use in Vue Enterprise Boilerplate and also learn how they can pull this out and build their own boilerplates that are specific to their company and what their company needs. Debbie is one such person who has done that, and I linked to her sort of Nuxt port of this, and other people have also made Nuxt ports with different kind of features depending on what you're looking for. And on the Vue Awesome repo, there are a lot of other great boilerplate projects. Now, maintaining an enterprise app. These are a little bit contrived. I always, whenever I have like some kind of trick I've learned, I try to find some way to make it memorable, not just for me, but for other people, because it sticks more. But code is like comedy. Like the more you have to explain it, the less funny it is. And so, similarly for your code, if you do something really brilliant, but you have to sit down for an hour to explain to your colleagues exactly why it's so brilliant, it's probably not actually such a good idea, even though you are still a very smart person. That's maybe clever in the bad way. I have clever in a good way and clever in a bad way. Clever in a bad way is when you're clever in a way that doesn't actually help the people around you. And clever in a good way is when it does actually help the people around you and help the future you. So you want code that someone looks at, and without you even saying anything, they're like, oh, that's so elegant. I love that. Code is also like stuff. I moved recently, getting rid of almost all my Star Trek stuff. I still kept the badge, of course. But something I've experienced both with coding and in moving is that when you have a lot of stuff, you have to do something with it. Like, it's your responsibility. Even if you're not using it, it's still a pain. And the same is true for code that you're not using. For code that maybe does more than you need it to right now. It's solving a problem that no longer exists, but you never really delete it. And then it ended up just like cluttering the place. And you can't really tell what's going on. And when new people join the team, within 5 minutes of them scanning over the code base for the first time, you see this look over their eyes where they're thinking, did I make the right decision? Oh gosh, I should have gone in the hospitality business. Not that that's a thought I've ever had. So I think it's very important to try to minimize the code that you write and challenge the product team when they say, like, we really think we need this feature. Like, if there's not already like a QA and research team who is, figuring out what the needs of users actually are, I think it's actually really useful and up to devs to say, I don't know if we really need that, and it would actually add a lot of complexity to the app. So is it worth it? Is it worth it for something that we feel like 20% confident anyone will even use? Code is also like garbage, sometimes more literally than others. I've certainly written code where I've looked back on it a year later, maybe a week later, and thought, gosh, who wrote this? They should be fired. And it turns out, yeah, that was me, actually. I think they should not be fired. I think they're probably paid unfairly, actually. But they need more support in their learning and development. And they were under a very strict timeline. So I think, given that, they did a pretty good job. But code is also like garbage in that you want your code to be easy to throw away. When you're building a new abstraction and you're thinking about the ways that requirements could change in the future, try to look forward a little bit and think like, okay, so if we design it this way, will this all be enmeshed and it'll be totally hard to just to get rid of this code if we decide to get rid of it, or if we decide to take parts of it into a different direction? To untangle the parts that you want and throw out the rest. So modular code, and generally the more modular the better. Sometimes you can get a little carried away. The more modular the better. You'll have an easier time throwing away code. Blake Newman, who organizes Vue.js London, who is hydrating me today, uses a term called sacrificial architecture. Build architecture that you're ready to sacrifice at any time. That you could get rid of it and replace it with something else, and it wouldn't be a huge headache. And also, this sort of worked out. I didn't plan this originally, but because I found this image, it's also good to reuse code rather than having code that you can't reuse. So in that way, it's a little bit like garbage too. It's good to reuse garbage if you can. It's sort of a side message, but I think everybody here already knows that one. Now, there are also complexity leaps as you are building and maintaining an application. One of the biggest leaps is when you go from one front end to two front ends, or one team to two teams. Suddenly, it's way more complicated. Even one developer to two developers. One developer, you have everything in your head, and you don't need to communicate with anyone. You don't have to explain your decisions to anyone. And then two, suddenly you have to go through this phase, and you have to communicate and make sure you're both on the same page, and you have to start creating documentation to get everyone on the same page. Vue Enterprise Boilerplate, by the way, starts with some really great documentation, so you don't need to do that, even if you're starting with one person. But I don't know why I did that to the microphone. I want you to hear it, but not someone else. I don't know. So these complexity leaps are often when I get a call. When people are going through this transition, and they're like, I don't know exactly what to do, or we tried something, and it's not really working. And my one biggest recommendation is monorepos. A lot of people, when they move from one front end to two front ends, for example, they realize okay, well, there are actually a lot of shared components, and other things that we'd like to have in both code bases. And so they create a separate repository for each project, and they individually publish these shared components And then what happens is people are working on a feature, and they need to make some change to a shared component. They find themselves having to stop their work, go and develop that shared component, submit that for feedback, wait for feedback. Maybe there are a few rounds. Depending on how many other teams you have, you may need to have a lot of different people give you feedback on that code. And then eventually you can publish it. And then once it's published, you can go back, and then you realize, ooh, see, now that I'm actually using this, there's another change that I need to make. And you go back and you repeat the process, and it takes you forever. It takes you forever with that process. With monorepos, it's a little bit different. First, I'll start with defining what I mean by a monorepo. I mean a single code base with independently deployable or publishable projects that share some common resources also in that code base. And what this does is it allows that person to make those changes to this other library, this shared component, while they're working on their feature, rather than stopping and having to work on that. And then having all these periods where you're just waiting for feedback, doing nothing, and then maybe working on some other feature, and your attention's getting split, and you're less productive when you're multitasking, because that's just how our brains work. But you still want to do something because you feel like you're stealing from the company by just sitting there waiting for a review. So this way you get to do all of that work at once and then get one round of reviews. It's much, much, much faster. And there are some other tips too, but I don't have time for them today, so you can talk to me later if you really want some more information. But monorepo is not a monolith. A lot of people, when they hear monorepo, they think monolith, and monolith is kind of like legacy. Like, it's more a description of how we feel about something than what it actually is. Not even with loose equality. Does a monorepo equal? Okay, I'm going to make a little note that joke did not work. Yeah. Maybe with a better animation? No, probably not. So when we think of monolith, we think of everything sort of meshed together. We think of these tools here, where everything is just sort of disorganized and everywhere, and it's so huge. And not only can you not deploy things together, but we have all these other problems with what we associate with monoliths. Just big mess and so much confusion, and you have to know about everything in order to just work on one little thing. It doesn't feel modular a lot of times. And this is a subtle difference, where this person is building some of their own tools, their own sort of workspaces in order to figure out where to keep their tools. And some of this is a little bit disorganized still. We see this planing knife. Is it really a planing knife? Did I get that right? I'm going to say yes, because no one's correcting me. I should have just said it confidently. I'll do it next time. This planing knife, which I use all the time in my woodworking, right? Doesn't seem to be with any other planing knives or anything. And then there's these pliers that are just sort of on their own, and there's some other pliers up here. And then they only have one adjustable wrench. I don't know how that's possible, because I always end up with 10 adjustable wrenches. I think after a certain age also, friends, when they get you presents, they just get you tools. Especially if you're a father. I am not a father, I still get tools. I don't know if they think I'm going to have kids soon and I need to build that crib, or I don't know. But this is still a lot more organized, and what's important is that it's easy. It's really easy to move things around. So monorepos make sharing easier, while still keeping you productive. And these are some great tooling for monorepos, which I don't have a lot of time to get into, but check them out. These top two are probably my favorite for projects, and then Lerna is pretty good for deployable libraries. I use the Yarn workspaces for more like really simple cases and Rush for more advanced. Lerna for libraries, and then Bolt I've never actually used, but it's popular, so I figured I'd list it up here. Some people are finding success with it. In terms of component organization, another important part of organizing your app as a whole and maintaining it. A lot of people like to go for nested components like this. I personally do not. And the reason is that this can feel organized. Like, we like putting things in boxes. My wife and I shop at the Container Store. The Container Store is great. Can I get a woo for the Container Store, anyone? Woo! Woo! Not enough woos. Check out the Container Store, you'll love it. But we can get a little carried away sometimes, where we'll put like boxes inside of boxes inside of boxes, and then it takes me 5 minutes to like get a new chapstick. It's not practical, but it's so organized. And I think that we can do the same thing with components, where we have all these forms, a bunch of these inputs here, and it's a little bit hard to see like what's inside of what in the sidebar of my editor. And some things also have the same name, like input and form. I've been in projects where I do the quick file search. And I search for something like button, and I see, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. I see 20 different button.vue components. And the folder, you'll notice, is sort of like grayed out and smaller. That's how it is in most editors, most IDEs. And in this case, I couldn't even see everything. So it was source, components, some other common library, some other common folder, some other common folder, and then like more stuff that I couldn't even see because it was just dot, dot, dot. So the most important information was sort of hidden from me. So it makes it really hard to find and quickly navigate to the right components when the important information isn't right there in the component name. So I generally prefer something like, whoops, got to go full screen again. Something like this. And even really large companies, like last I talked to someone at Facebook, they were still using a structure like this for, I think at the time it was 40,000 components, which is a lot, and they are not regretting it. It's still helpful. I also find it extremely, extremely useful and really important to wrap vendor components. When you get components from some third party, most of the time, what I like to do is import them in some component, like this base icon component, and then at the bottom we have a little bit of glare, but I use that in the template, but I only use it if the source is font awesome, and I can place a lot of validations on the props to make the source font awesome by default. And I can give nice warnings if people use this wrong. I can also let them know which icons I've actually imported, which ones are available. So you provide a really nice interface to not just icons, but how you want icons to be used inside your component. And this also provides, in the case of an icon, a really nice place to import those individual component definitions, so we don't end up with like 1,000 different icons when we use 3. This also makes it much easier when you decide later that you want to migrate away from Font Awesome and use something else. You don't have to change it in the 2,000 places that you are using icons currently. And that is not an exaggeration. It was over 2,000 in one code base, over 2,000 places where people were using. It wasn't Font Awesome, but it was some other icon library. And if they had gone with a vendor component to start with, this would have been a 1-file change rather than like I think it was like a 600-file change, something like that. In 1,000 instances. Or 2,000, no, it was over 2,000, yeah. So making it easy to follow best practices, these aren't relevant details to the story. I'm getting too obsessed. I find it so important to make it easy to follow best practices. The less time people spend arguing on whether they want semicolons or no semicolons, or how they want to format their components, and whether they want to use Pascal case or kebab case, the faster we can get to just like doing work. Because I can guarantee you, like, no matter which of those you choose, semicolons or no semicolons, or Pascal case or kebab case, like, it's not going to be the deciding factor that like makes your app fail. I promise you. So lint and format everything, and be aggressive with it. Like, even in things where no one really cares, just pick something. Pick some standard. And we offer ESLint plugin Vue, which has a recommended rule set that can be really, really good as a base, which also enforces a lot of rules in our official style guide. I also like to use custom snippets and generators. I like to use VS Code, which has custom workspace snippets that you can use. And generators with Hygen, which, again, these people keep stealing my content. I should have gone yesterday. Again, I believe it was, who talked about Hygen yesterday? But Debbie did, yeah, that's right. So I'm generating a new component, I'm calling it whatevs, and then it tells me component names should contain at least 2 words to avoid conflicts with existing and future HTML elements. Oh, I love this. I love this. It's something that like you don't even have to tell people up front because they can learn as you go. Like the app actually tells them, it teaches them how to work on it. And I also like to use, And when I generate an actual component, something I like to do is it generates a unit test alongside that, because a lot of times, like, who here has like 100% coverage on unit tests? My hand is down, but I want other people's, on any app, even just like any app, 100% coverage on unit tests? No. So I guess everybody here is just bad at their jobs, because we all agree testing is good, right? Wow. But I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But one of the hardest things about unit tests is just like creating the boilerplate and creating the file to get over that initial hump. And then once it's there, it's a lot easier to add other tests. So I like to add one basic test with the boilerplate right there when you create things like components, utilities, Vuex modules. And I also really like internal warnings. There are some cases, prop validators can be really, really helpful. But there are other times when you need to validate something based on multiple props. And in a prop validator, you only have access to the value of that one prop. So sometimes I'll have a method like this that might be called, uncreated. And I'm checking to see if there's an href prop for this base link component. And then I'm checking to see if we passed in an allow insecure prop. And if we didn't, if allow insecure is false, and the link doesn't start with HTTPS mail to or tell, then we yell at them. We do a little console.warn, insecure base link href. When linking to external sites, always prefer HTTPS URLs. So, and you can do this in so many cases. There are so many code reviews where I find myself giving the same advice like over and over because people just like don't remember. And if you do something like this, you can build it in so that it's just not possible. And during linting, there's a rule in ESLint to say like, oh yeah, if there are like warnings or errors, fail. Oh, it's beautiful. Or not during linting, I'm sorry, during testing, you can set it so that if there are warnings or errors that actually trigger. And something I'm doing that's smart here is this, if I do say so myself, process.env.nodeenv equals production, return. People are wondering why I do that. It's because like, if you're doing a lot of validations like this, some people might be thinking like, oh, yeah, sure, that sounds like it'd be create a great developer experience, but I don't want that like filling up my app, even though it's never going to be used in production. And what Webpack does, if you're using Webpack, and this is assuming a Webpack environment here, is it simplifies process.env.nodeenv to this when it does equal production or when it equals something else, just a string. And then it simplifies that further to true, because it knows the string production will always equal production. And then it sees if true, return, and then it realizes, okay, like this is never going to run, so we can just get rid of it. And so this is what actually compiles in your production code. It's much cleaner. Now tests. We all agree that testing is like a good thing, right? We should do it, but apparently we're not. You know, we're just bad at our jobs. I see it sort of like when I go to the dentist and they ask me, so how often are you flossing? I've experimented with this. I can say twice a day, and it's like, you should really do it after every meal. And I feel like they don't even know. Like, if my gums are doing okay, like, just let it go. Haven't had a cavity since I was like 11, okay? So like, I'm taking care of things. And testing is kind of the same way, and you have to start somewhere though. And there are really two essential E2E tests that I recommend. One of them is, can users log in? Can they give us money? I'll say like, I will quit if we do not have at least like end-to-end tests for this. We don't need any unit tests necessarily, just like start here. Because if these two things don't work, they don't need to log out. That's like a luxury. They don't need to cancel their subscription. They'll be mad, but like, if they can't give you money, you don't even have angry customers. You don't have customers. So this is so essential. And fortunately, I'm very, very glad we're going to hear a lot about Cypress later today, because Cypress changed my life. Like I go door to door sometimes in tech neighborhoods and just ask people, have you heard about Cypress? Yeah. Have you brought Cypress into your heart? Because it really does make me so, so happy, and it's one of my favorite tools in the world, like online, with, like at the same level of Vue, that kind of love. Keeping an app performant. I have top three perf tips. I tried to narrow it down to one, into like one slide. There's unnecessary code, in which case, as Eduardo mentioned the other day, also stealing my content, when you're routing, you can change your component definition to a lazy load with Webpack's import that will separate it into a separate chunk. And that solves the problem of, like, let's say, has anyone had like an admin dashboard that is like half of their app in code size, but only 5% of their users use it? Yeah? Yeah, that's pretty common. So I actually like to do this with all of my routes. And that way, for the parts of the app that people don't ever need to see, they don't have to download that code. So even as your code grows, you can stay performant. There are also unnecessary renders. My top tip here is to check out Vue Virtual Scroller. Usually when there's an unnecessary render, it's because you're rendering something like 100,000 table cells. First of all, let's be real. Are they really going to scroll through 100,000 table cells? Do you think that's excessive? Maybe you don't even need that much data. But okay, let's say product says we need all 100,000 in there. Then, or even just 10,000 or 1,000. Vue Virtual Scroller helps you scroll through data, but it only renders the stuff that is actually visible to users. So you don't have to wait for all 10,000 cells, most of which the user will never see, and is invisible because it's not in the window, unless they have some mega big screen. And unnecessary re-renders. And for this, my favorite tip is to use keep alive. Keep alive with a key. So for people who aren't familiar with component, it allows you to have a dynamic component, which is often used for things like a tabbed interface. And for the current tab, let's say there's a lot of stuff that renders in the current tab, or on each tab, but whenever you switch to the tab, there's half a second delay because it has to re-render that content every time before it throws it out. And this tells Vue, once you render that component, just keep it in memory, so we have it. And then going between tabs is instantaneous. And Guillaume has a great talk. Guillaume Chow on the Vue team has a great talk on performance where he goes over those kinds of tips and a lot more. Now the future, real quick. Simpler, more explicit, composition API. A lot of people have talked about composition API, so I'm actually going to kind of skip over this part. Da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da, and that's all. So I think I gave you the briefest and simplest explanation. Didn't even have to use real words to explain the composition API. Thank you so much to my Vuesionary sponsors, Vuetify, Vue School, Vue Mastery, and Ben Hong. They make work like this possible. Thank you so much. And thank you, all of you. I am Chris V. Fritz, pretty much everywhere. And you can see me, or you can see these slides here later today when I fix a bug in one of the slides.